The United States has imposed sanctions on 5 people linked to the Lebanese resistance movement Hezbollah. One of the blacklisted individuals who've already been designated as global terrorists is Jawad Nasrallah, son of Hezbollah leader. Individuals are accused of coordinating Hezbollah's operational, intelligence, and financial activities in Iraq. U.S. Treasury says aim is to prevent Hezbollah from laundering money, procuring weapons, and training fighters in Iraq. Washington has already targeted the Lebanese resistance group with several rounds of sanctions. Hezbollah played an instrumental role in fighting foreign-backed terrorists in Syria. Joining us now out of Ontario, Canada, is Mr. Jason Unruhe, political commentator. Hello, Jason. It's a pleasure to have you back on the program. Your thoughts on the Hezbollah leader's son now getting sanctioned by the West?
Well, I think this is definitely a sign by the United States that they're worried about the unfolding situation inside of the Middle East. Hezbollah has been a very strong ally of Syria and cooperating with them on numerous measures to that regard, defeating the terrorists in the U.S.-backed terrorists inside of Syria. Not to mention that they are very closely aligned with Iran and Iranian interests, particularly with the turning of Iraq away from the U.S. and towards Iran. There is a budding relationship there that does include Hezbollah to some degree. Now, these accusations of smuggling oil, whether or not they're true, I haven't seen any evidence of them. But I think this is very reflective of the fact that the United States is losing influence inside the region. They went through the entire effort to overthrow Saddam Hussein for deciding to sell their oil in euros instead of US dollars. And now they seem to be losing control over Iraq once again. While they still have military forces inside the country, but they don't have the economic power that they once had. And I think that this is a reflection of the U.S. getting very frustrated. I mean, they've wanted to go after Hezbollah for some time now, but there hasn't been much of a real justification for doing so. They don't have a real reason to go in there, something that would affect them directly to justify their intervention. However, this growing influence between Iran, Hezbollah, Iraq, and some other states who want to move away from U.S. influence, this is concerning the U.S. So I think that this is probably the opening shot against Hezbollah for something that will probably turn into a larger conflict. I think that the United States is now fully ingratiating themselves into Hezbollah affairs much more than they have previously, because of them losing their influence inside of the region.
And Jason, why would you say Washington keeps going after Hezbollah the way it does, at least through rhetoric, trying to blacklist them as a terror organization, sanctioning their leaders and anybody that pretty much deals with Hezbollah? What kind of threat is Hezbollah to Washington, and why does Washington have such a thing for Hezbollah?
Well, frankly, Hezbollah is not a military threat to the United States at all. Most of the world is not a threat to the United States. However, Hezbollah is a threat to U.S. interests inside the region. They are allying with forces that are opposed to U.S. imperialist conflict, opposed to U.S. imperialist control over various countries, and that's the real threat that the United States sees right now, is a growing coalition of forces willing to counter, willing to stand up to their power inside the region. The U.S. sees, they're having maybe a bit of their Spartacus moment where one person stands up and then another person stands up, and then as more people stand up, others are more emboldened to do so. And I think that this, in the wider conflict in the Middle East, the U.S. is very much losing. They're losing influence over Iraq. They have an unwinnable war in Afghanistan. It's very clear that the Syrian government, the rightfully elected leader, Assad, and the legitimate government are going to eventually topple what remaining terrorists there are still inside of Syria. And that's the real threat here for the United States, is a growing front against their interests.
Thank you for joining us here out of Ontario, Canada, Mr. Jason Unruhe, political commentator. Thank you, Jason.